I emphasize again, I must emphasize, I am absolutely shocked by Nelson's ability to always come up with some absolutely crazy, wild idea that was definitely not on my horizon at all. Hello chicos, welcome back. We are now on to round 5 from the Texas State Championship, and we are once again following our greatest friend, the one and only National Master Nelson Lopez, as he is just about to begin his round 5 game. This time around, the lady. Our opponent is going to be Ellery Zhang, who is, if I'm not mistaken, so far Nelson's highest rated opponent. There she is kicking off already with the D4. So she is sporting a healthy 1916 rating, which once again, from memory, is Nelson's highest rated opponent, and Nelson is already in third. Remember that in the first round he played the Knight Tango. I don't expect that to be repeated, so something else might be on the menu. I don't know Nelson's repertoire too well with the black pieces against D4. Maybe King's Indian? I vaguely recall him publishing something about King's Indian. Now he's through to his French roots, but generally speaking, people who play D4, E6 either tend to have a strong tendency to go into Dutch or into some triangle semi-Slav stories, as we shall see after C4. It is F5 indeed, so we have got a Dutch on our hands, and the reason why I'm rubbing my hands is because it's very cold here. Nah, jokes. It is cold actually, but the reason why I'm rubbing my hands because the Dutch is a fun, attacking, aggressive opening. Once again, a perfect fit for our friend Nelson, and G3 is also correct. A little subtlety here is that if we want to play the classical Dutch, the early C4 move actually plays to black's favor, because here instead of the standard bishop E7, we can actually trade bishops on B4. However, our friend is cooking something altogether different here as he plays D5. So now we are headed, ladies and gentlemen, for the so-called stonewall variation of the Dutch defense. The reason why it's called the stonewall is because black is looking to complete this pawn formation with pawn c6, which creates an extremely robust, very difficult to break pawn structure in the center. Now, the downside of the stonewall is that because of the way how the pawns are moving forward, the dark squares are chronically weak in black's camp, whereas white doesn't really have a weak square per se, although we very often like to jump into e4. So c6 completes the stonewall, and generally speaking, black is looking to be the aggressor on the king side, which usually is accomplished by moves such as, not king f1, bishop d6, let's say castles, and then queen e8, queen h5, bring the horse, bring the horse, bring the horse, g5, g4, f4, carnage. So that is basically the plan. So bishop goes here, knight goes here, castle. Sometimes this bishop gets developed out this way. And also sometimes this bishop gets rerouted here. Generally speaking, the c8 bishop is the biggest problem piece from black's point of view, because we are buried behind the pawn formation. Yeah, that's a bit of an issue, but other than that, it is a rock solid opening. Opponent played a knight bd2. Wait, I missed the black move. Oh, no, because opponent didn't castle. Knight d2 is strange. Knight d2 is definitely strange. There is not really a very good reason to put the knight here, unless we want to play knight e5 and back the knight with the other knight on f3. But I don't think that was priority for the time being. But yeah, both players are just playing out very logical developing moves. b3, queen c2, and I guess knight e5 are the moves that white can seriously consider here. Obviously the position is ever so slightly more pleasant for white. I mean, white is white, so most openings are preferable to white a little bit. And once again, the Dutch stonewall has a reputation of rock solid, but positionally not quite sound. I find it strange that she committed to knight bd2 pretty quickly, and now she's taking a big thing. So that tells me that this might not have been as well thought out as it may have looked like. Yeah, once again, b3. And by the way, before one develops the knight, there is this idea of playing an early b3, especially once castling is done, with the idea of trading the dark squared bishop, which is white's good bishop. So now b3 feels to me a little bit like an afterthought. Granted, the bishop is going to stand okay on b2, covering the e5 square and just completing development, but very often you find in the stonewall that merely developing your pieces with white is not good enough. You actually need to be playing it ambitiously, because otherwise black gets very, very quick and fast counterplay in the center and on the king side. Now Nelson, he commits to bishop e8. This is once again the very well-known positional plan of trading the bishop off, preferably for a knight. I don't really like this move here too much though, because I feel like it's reasonably easy to dodge the trade, and the bishop on h5, if it doesn't get traded away, then it tends to be in the way for a further kingside attack by means of queen e8, queen h5. The other thing that I'm not so convinced about is that how bad is the trade if I keep the pawn on e2 and I do something outlandish like this and I go like take me, and then after ef3 I have got a fabulous e-file to work with. Yeah, I think that in this case Nelson should refrain from taking completing instant development, chucking the knight on e4, and only then look to do something on the king side. So yeah, maybe it is fine. It is fine. Perhaps the better idea, the strategically more sound idea, is to evacuate on the diagonal reasonably quickly, so that we don't have a trade. But then again, the e2 pawn is awkwardly hanging, so maybe best is here. But here again, taking I think is a mistake on account of ef, not how I instinctively immediately take back with the pawn. The reason for this is because although to many, especially on lower levels, it may look like a counterintuitive move because it blocks the bishop and creates double pawns, but I already had many rants about double pawns and the nonsense that they are bad. The f3 pawn cancels out the e4 square altogether, and that means that this knight is a lot more dead than this bishop is. And also I have opened up the e-file, which means that now we have got a very annoying target on e6. So yeah, yep, opponent played knight e5, and yeah, bishop h5, logical. And now I would probably play knight df3. Knight df3 is logical. Rook c1 is a fine move. Rook e1 is a bit of a meh move. Generally speaking, you don't want to move the rook away, because when the knight pops up on e4, it attacks f2, and sometimes there are tactical justifications, or rather tactical tricks that justify that the rook should stay on f1. Oh, she played knight df3. She's definitely living up to the rating expectation that she's a tough cookie. She's definitely playing this now really well. It is now Nelson's time to spend a bit more time on the clock. Knight d7, knight e4 are the two most natural and logical moves. Nothing like trying to combine natural and logical to invent a new word, lateral. So knight e4 is a very lateral move, and knight bd7 is one as well. Knight e4 played, one of the more logical ones. Goody. So now for the first time, white needs to come up. No, actually no, not yet. I can still play something like queen c2. And then we need to come up with some kind of a plan, which generally speaking is more challenging for white than for black. The structure is favorable for white, but ironically finding a good plan to do something with the strategic plus of having an outpost on e5 is weighing on white more than on black, who just wants to continue kingside attack, sometimes f4, sometimes g5, g4. Yeah. So it's actually white who needs to be a little bit more creative about how to organize life. And very often it ends up being a pawn storm on the queen side, by the way, which generally speaking leads to softening up the queen side pawn formation and trying to find some kind of a weakness there. e3 played. Okay, so the upside of the move is that it denies e3. The downside of the move is that it created a self-pin. Now, why is the self-pin important? I'm not sure if it is, but if it is, the reason for that would be that Nelson now can opt for a capture on e5, which would mean that the e5 outpost is now occupied by a pawn, which by definition means that it has stopped being an outpost. And now we can just continue developing our pieces toward the king side, and things are looking decent. The issue with this idea is that the pawn on e5 is definitely a bit of a thorn in our side, because these squares are no longer accessible, and also the diagonal here can be a bit of a problem. Yeah, Nelson goes in for a different trade altogether, which is also playable. Bishop takes f3. And I suspect that after whatever retake, we are going to play knight d7, completing development. This is always a sigh of relief in the Dutch stonewall, because remember that bishop is generally stuck behind the pawns here. And now we managed to successfully go around to h5 and trade it off. So yeah, it looks like cool biz. Wait, I missed a pair of moves. Okay, go back. Apologies for me being a little bit sloppy here. Knight e5, bishop h5, knight f3, knight e4, queen c2, a5. This is where we are at. And that's when she played e3, if I'm not mistaken, and that's when Nelson decided to take. Apologies about this hiccup. It didn't really impact anything of what I said. a5 is a funky move that may or may not have been necessary. I'm okay with this. Occasionally it shuts down a3, b4. Sometimes it floats the idea of 1919. I didn't really see why it was necessary, to be honest. I would have preferred maybe knight d7, but yeah, it's fine. So she takes back with the bish, and now either knight d7 or knight a6 is what I would anticipate. I'm near certain it's gonna be knight d7. I actually quite like Nelson's position here, because black has managed to trade off their worst piece, and so with this firm control on e4, there is not a lot to fear, and I still feel that white is rather planless here. White is indeed rather planless. And then we commit to the somewhat mysterious bishop g2 move. Okay, so what is the idea? The idea is clearly that white would like to float the idea of kicking the knight out from e4 by playing f3, and, God forbid, later on even break the center with e4. What should we do against this? One thing we can do is to take, and then play bishop c5. That would be good if it weren't bad, but it is. Bear with me. So the idea of bishop c5 obviously is to stop f3, right? But unfortunately it's blundering because now the queen is tagging the bishop, and so no matter how I take back after bishop e4, I'm losing a piece. Which means that unfortunately I can't go where I want it to go. So maybe pull just back here. But now f3 is playable, so that kind of defeats the purpose of my trade on e5. Okay, plan B. Maybe take and pull back here. I didn't want to pull back here because I wanted to keep this diagonal open for my queen. But the upside of this move, is that now I can come back to c5. In the line where I put the bishop here, this move looks far less attractive on account of this pin on the knight and the rook. So yeah, maybe knight e5 is a playable scenario here. Wait, what? First of all, Nelson fell asleep. No, he's wide awake. Never mind, false alarm. But secondly, there is a pawn on h5. And once again, I emphasize again, I must emphasize, I am absolutely shocked by Nelson's ability to always come up with some absolutely crazy, wild idea that was definitely not on my horizon at all. So h5 is obviously played with the intention of playing h4 and softening up the white king side. And as such, it is a very, very handy, logical idea. The question, of course, begs to be asked, what if f3? Now if we come back here, then I would be maybe a little bit worried about the consequences of e4. Although, oh no, actually this is very good for us. No, this is blunder, because after take, check, and knight g4, Nelson has very, very dangerous threats here. Okay, sorry, that was maybe a bit too fast, but work with me. So take, and now I can utilize the diagonal with my bishop, and then I can jump around with the horse on these dark squares. So, first good news is that f3, e4 doesn't work. Knight g6 is a bit of a pest. And then after rook f7, maybe prepping e4 now would look better. Actually, why do I need to prep it? Can't I just go? Yeah, this looks like the type of action I would play here with black. With white, trying to counterpunch and hit black when they are the most vulnerable. Yeah, this kind of scenario is not happy for black. Now e6 is loose, the g6 knight is annoying, our pawn structure is all over the shop. This is not pretty. Yeah, this is roughly what I would be afraid of, having seen pawn h5. Yeah, h5 is very, very bold. The usual, may I say, reckless, but at the same time extremely creative attacking style of Nelson's never fails to disappoint. No, never fails to impress. Oops, definitely getting late. Apologies. So it never fails to impress. I like it. It's cool. Would I play it? No. Do I like the fact that he did? Yes. Do I think that it's practically a very annoying move to face? Also yes. Like, this is the type of move that if I received in an over-the-board game with long time control, I would be happy. But if someone played this against me in lower time controls, that would be a different story. She responded correctly with f3. Nelson dropped the knight back to f6. And once again, I really like here knight g6 before white commits with e4. Hello? Opponent plays h4? What? Oh my. That looks ugly. That looks ugly. And my chess coaching mantra goes like this: when a move is ugly, it's usually bad too. So why do I call this move ugly? The reason for that is because, first of all, it's an overreaction. Because let's be honest, h4, as much as it was the plan, is not a threat that should make you feel intimidated. At all, in fact. Right? And so I consider this to be an overreaction. I also think that white, by playing h4, has weakened her king more, has damaged her own king's defense more than Nelson could have done to her by playing h4 takes. No joke. So not only did white not do anything useful here, but in fact they have compromised their king's safety when it was their turn to do something productive instead. Now, that being said, finding headway on the king side is going to be extremely difficult, especially if white locks down the whole entire board with f4. For example, queen b8 or queen c7, can't tell which, is looking like a very logical plan to try to put more pressure here. And if f4, then we might want to jump in here. But this has got some very, very strong drawish vibes. The chess vibes. So the big question now is that what can Nelson do here that would allow him to keep the position more flexible, more dynamic, rather than completely rigid with this very, very tightly locked up pawn structure in the center and on the king side. Yeah, these two looking like the most natural moves. Not that the queen on e7 looks good, but it falls for a knight g6 fork. Whereas taking on c4 would obviously just improve the pawn structure and black would just surrender the center. So this is definitely not desirable. Yep, queen c7 makes perfect sense. And now I'm really praying that the opponent is not going to play f4, because I would find that that position would be very stale. The problem that we're facing here is that opponent doesn't really have too much of a choice, because if it's not f4, it would have to be queen c3 to defend e5, and this move looks all kinds of clumsy. And so I'm pretty certain it's gonna be f4, and I've got nothing. I like black, but I also don't dislike white enough to say that black is ahead here. Like the bar indicates an ever so slightly better position for white, black, excuse me, but how we break up this pawn chain? I mean, c5 is our only pawn break, right? Unless g5 works on some tactical grounds, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. Yep, f4 played. f4 played. There was no question about this. And once again, the onus is on Nelson to do something creative here. Luckily, he's definitely not lacking the creativity in the creativity department, so I can't even guess what he's cooking here. I would do one of these two. But Nelson the Mad Lad, he is capable of pulling some bunnies out of hats that, you know, we are unaware of the existence of not only the bunny but even the hat. So yeah, I'm very curious. Now, out of these two, which one would I prefer to play? I don't know. Probably g4. Because after knight e4, I would be a bit worried about the consequences of take. If I take back this way, now we opened up a little bit on the king side, right? But it's still no open file in sight. And it's difficult to see how our pieces can penetrate. Maybe knight to f6, then take, then knight g4. Yeah, that could be it. That could be it. Right, so let's say they go here, we go here, they play a pass, I take this, and then I go in here. And now my knight is somewhat better than the bishop, although this is always very annoying, because when I trade the rook, I can't bring the other rook to the open file. That being said, this position looks good for black because the knight on g4 is a monster, and because of the pawn-knight combo covering these two squares, white can never pile up on the f-file to create threats and penetration on the f-file. So maybe even knight e4 is doable. Knight g4 is also on the cards when we can take it like this. But if you ask me, okay, but what's your winning plan now? I got none. Of course Nelson is not doing what I am talking about. He takes the bishop, rather the knight, excuse me, with the bishop. Although, rest assured, he is gonna jump in next to one of these two squares. I expect fe, but can I explain why? No, I cannot. D extends the diagonal of the bishop, but lessens white's control in the center. Now the c5 square is available for black. On the other hand, fe keeps this bishop really bad. It extends the f-file vision, and it keeps the grip on the center more firmly on. Actually, there's a crazy wild tactical variation here. Ooh, I'm actually worried a little bit here. Yeah, now I see one downside to doing this move order rather than jumping in with the knight to the destination square first. And I'm going to explain this to you when I figure out what the destination square is upon recapture. So she took with the D. And now I'm going to explain to you what my concern is. If we go knight g4, well, actually, no, I would have better explained it if they took back with the other way. The point was that in either case, there is a pin now here, which I may be able to exploit by sacking an exchange. I'm not sure. The idea being that you can't retake like so because this is hanging, and you also cannot retake like so because I just take, and once again, you are pinned, therefore no retake for you. So best, of course, is to accept the exchange sack on e3. I would then go maybe queen c3. And if you take my rook, I want it to go d6. Check and takes. And now black is really, really suffocated by this incredible pawn chain, which includes a very nasty pass pawn on d6. This could be a potential plan. But instead, we went knight to g4, which, by the way, again recreates the same concern. So now I have got this, takes, queen here, takes, and here the engine actually doesn't want to play d6, it wants to just take. Wait for black to do something, and then d6. Now this would reverse the roles. Now it is white who is playing very creative chess, and Nelson would have to defend tenaciously to prove that the rooks actually have a chance to find an open file somewhere and do some damage to white. I don't expect this to happen though. What I expect is going to happen is that she's either going to play bishop d4 or more likely rook e1. And this would be fabulous news to us because now we can bring in the other knight to e4 and have a stellar position. Note that bishop d4 is good because it's not bad because of c5. That was beautifully phrased because again the pin on the c file. This was the reason. This pin on the c file, while I disliked the take on e5 and instead would have preferred to start here. Because now, no matter, like you can't just take on d5 now twice because there is no pin. But we already are threatening to take e3. Whereas in Nelson's move order, when we took first, and then we jumped in, now there is a pin. And so a couple of things cannot be done by black that we could have done if we reverse this move order. She's going to play bishop d4. I don't know what she doesn't like about her position, but... You what? Oh! Genius at work. I missed a pair of moves. I humbly apologize. It's getting late. I'm sorry, guys. So she played rook e1 to defend the pawn. And then Nelson played rook f to c8. Okay, I would have preferred he knight c5 with the idea of coming in, but I think Nelson didn't like the pin. And fair enough. So hence rook f c8, removing the boss from the diagonal of the bishop and getting ready for knight c5. And in that sense, bishop f3 played by Ellery is definitely a bit of an oddball because it allows knight in. Also, this capture is not something you would ever want to do. Because this is why it's good bishop, right? In the structure, because what determines is good and bad bishops, in case you haven't heard it yet, is the pawns blockaded on the color of the bishop is the bad bishop, right? So white has a lot of pawns blockaded on black. That makes this bishop bad. The good bishop is the one that can slide in between those pawns or amongst them. And also the one that has the ability to attack black's pawns. So giving this up looks completely unjustified in positional sense. And that's exactly what also justifies knight e4, because we want to provoke this bishop to be traded off for one knight or the other. We would really be happy with either or. Just please trade into us. Okay. Okay, b5 is fine. We're putting on a bit of a pressure. Chess.com engine claims it's a miss because knight c5 would have granted a sizable advantage, big enough so that not playing it means that it counts as a miss. The engine's idea was the same as mine, to chuck the knight in on e4 and then retake like so. And what it does basically is that now we have got a 4 versus 3 on the queen side, which allows us in the longer run to play for creating a passed pawn, whilst our 3 pawns, or 4 if you will, blockade white's 5 on the king side perfectly well, so that white is completely incapable of making any progress with the king side pawns. And hence b5 being a miss. Now she can choose to shut the board down with c5, after which, by the way, again, Nelson would have a very serious creative problem at his hands, which is how to blast it open. And there are 3 ways to do it, and I don't think that any of them are available. or will be ever doable. Number one, g5, which is probably the most likely of all, by the way, to work at one point, with the idea that if hg, then we break through with h4. This would obviously need all rooks on the h file first. Alright, plan number two, break with d4, but that's hardly a break, it doesn't give us anything, and besides, white is likely to play bishop d4. Break number three is this. But if I push, they push past. And so that makes it very, very challenging. Yeah, b5 I think was a strategic mistake. Yeah, I'm gonna call it a strategic mistake, and if she wants, she can really play some bunker chess and shut the board down with c5, at which point winning would be a very tough challenge. But instead, she picks up the gauntlet and plays rook c8, one rather, excuse me. Now, regrettably, knight c5 is not really great anymore, because we are going to fall into a massive pin. So, for example, cb, bishop d4 looks very, very dire indeed for us here. I can save the piece, but now we will have to surrender the c file to white, and this looks tragic. This looks absolutely tragic. So this is not playable. Funnily enough, my favorite move in this position is queen d8. To remove the queen from the pin and in fact turn it back on white. Now it's a potential discover attack. When they take, I take back with the tempo on the queen. And I'm also eyeing a little bit toward the king's side, which I'm pretty sure that our good friend Nelson wouldn't mind doing, considering that he is a beastly attacker who always loves stirring the pot on the king's side. All this being said, still c5 is available to Mrs. Zhang here to close the business down. Yes, queen d8 played. Guess that correctly. And once again, what we need to cheer for is that our opponent is not going to play for a boring drawish story with c5, but rather tries to open up something with cd or keeps the tension on. Yeah, so take on g4, hg4. This is great news, because now the e4 square is ours forever. So unless she now covers up e4, or rather c5, we are going to be able to jump in. Yeah, I really dislike this decision. And by the way, this is typical of club level chess, that I wanted to make a YouTube video about this because this topic comes up so much, but I always forget to grab the best examples, and this is actually one of them. When people get stuck in the think tank and they cannot come up with a decent idea, they can't find a plan, they can't find anything productive to do, almost always they default back to trades. Because subconsciously they think that a trade is going to retain pretty much everything on the board as was before, because it's a trade, equal value, therefore no value lost. But chess is a much more complex game than that, and in fact trades are very often not equal. This is a textbook case of that. That was a very, very good bishop that was responsible for covering the entire light-colored complex. And now, if we have a knight on e4, that is going to be an absolute royal beast and monster. So this capture was everything but equal. Ah, king g2. No, that just like begs for knight c5. That is begging for knight c5. But I think Nelson, he played b4. Why are we not going in? Let's go, and then we can do the pretty moves out with the pawns afterwards. Not to mention the fact that b4 might not be a move we want to play at all. So knight c4 5 is first, because we want this knight in on e4 at all cost. And white can do nothing meaningful with the pawns here that would justify b4. This knight is coming in, and he did. I don't understand this move. Like after b4, if black was given another move, he would play knight c5, which begs the question of why was b4 required before we played knight c5. I've got nothing here. I've got nothing. The engine also considers the move to be an inaccuracy, by the way. So you can see after king g2, you'll see the bar, which is almost -2, and when I play b4, it comes down noticeably, like halving Nelson's advantage. Generally speaking, I'm pretty good at deciphering the more mysterious end of Nelson's move spectrum. This one definitely got the better of me. Opponent played a4. So now we have a dilemma. We can opt to get the knight in on e4, but that means that the pawn structure is not going to be broken up. Alternatively, we can remind ourselves that en passant is legal, but now after bishop a3 we don't have access to knight c5. This is why I didn't like b4. Having said that, there is a very cute move available for our good friend Nelson here that might still justify this course of action, and that is a4. Splitting the pawns, and after ba, we can not capture a4 since it's guarded, but we can attack it, and now white can't defend it. And this will grant a definitely better position for us, because if white has to play c5, that means that this bishop has been buried now alive forever behind 5 pawns blockaded on its color, the ultimate bad bishop, whereas the knight is gonna be able to jump around on squares ultimately and bounce back to a nice outpost, whichever it will be, with a fine position. If we don't en passant, then knight e4, knight c5 is coming, we get the knight in, but now the whole entire position is clogged up again, and it is going to be a nightmare to try to make something happen. Obviously, black has got cute sacrificial ideas, such as bringing the queen across, bringing the queen up, and then bringing the rook over, and if the opponent falls asleep at the wheel, then we can sack and mate. Additionally to that, here we have a beautiful break, by the way, even if they do defend the h-file, by playing g5. Can't take because of mate, they have to take this way, and we retake this way. And now we can jump into either of these squares with the knight, and look to further blast the position open. Yeah, this is a very, very big decision. I think this is the time roughly when it dawns on Nelson that playing b4 was a mistake, and he should have gone in with the knight first. Yep, no take. Now I'm willing to bet quite serious amounts that bishop d4, knight e4, c5 will be played, leading us to the first really, really seriously clogged up position in the tournament. But this is really good news for Nelson in the sense that white has no winning plan here whatsoever. So if black does nothing but plays king here and then puts a rook on h5, white has nowhere to break through. Absolutely nowhere. And that is again a testament to the difference between the good knight and the bad bishop. Our knight allows us to have now tactical resources that still may allow us to play for winning strategies, winning plans. This bishop allows white to cry themselves to sleep. That's about it. This knight, that is a very, very, very potent piece on e4. No worries, rook c to d1. Does absolutely nothing as far as I'm concerned. Knight e4 is coming, this pin is irrelevant, and they cannot really do anything here. As such, I would label this as a total waste of a move. No disrespect to the lovely young lady, but yeah, no substance to this move whatsoever. I need to be gentle though, because the position is very, very challenging for white when it comes to doing something productive. I still think that the best course of action would have been to clog business up and then just pile up the rooks on the h-file to avoid any kind of tactics and walk away with a draw, which I don't think would have been avoidable. Despite the fact that the engine claims a 0.8 advantage, I just don't see the strategic element that allows black, to play for a win. If I put the rook here, put this one up here, put the other rook here, put the queen on e2, God forbid even on e1, it's not there. Okay, Nelson went cheeky. So after rook a d1, ct1 rather, he didn't go into e4 yet, he played first queen e7. It's totally fine. Like, this is a special feature of close positions, that he had an outpost available, he didn't jump in, he plays instead queen e7, oh my god, no, it's okay. And the reason for that is because white can do nothing to prevent the knight from jumping in anyway. And by the way, this is a preparatory move to start piling up the rooks on the h-file. So in a way, it's quite clever. Bishop d4 landed, we knew that. Is he contemplating takes? He is. And it's good that he is contemplating that, but it's not a good move. Because after take, although we do have a protected pass pawn, but white's control of the d file grants enough counterplay for a likely draw. No, you don't want this, Nelson. You want to keep the queens on, jump into e4, and take it from there. Yeah, every time Nelson takes a longer think in a position where I think the move is utterly obvious, I always think that he's gonna uncork some crazy Nelson-esque wild move that once again would never occur to me. But here I'm not really seeing it. Like the position is very, very dry for bold ideas. It has to be knight e4. They spent a solid 15 on it, I reckon, or at least 10. Wait, what? And he took? Yes, he did. Okay, so what this tells me, and it explains actually Nelson's last few moves. That explains queen e7 to me, the holding back the knight from not going in. So he plays queen e7. Yeah, so what I was going to tell you is that I think he evaluated knight e4 c5 as a draw where black had no realistic chances to break the king side, and so he tried everything in his powers to avoid that scenario. She just lost the game, by the way. And the reason why I'm saying it with such confidence is because I see here the plan that is going to win the game unstoppably for Nelson. That is knight e4, pawn c5, king f7, obtain the long diagonal, and there is nothing that white can do to meet the threat on the long diagonal. And this, friends, is the point where we need to rewind the tape all the way to the dreaded decision that white took here when I told you that low-rated and club players often default to trades when they don't have anything constructive to do. And very often when they trade, they think that it's equal, and it's not an equal trade. And now, 30 moves later, not 30, 10, she is going to pay a very hefty price for making the blunder of taking this back with the queen too soon. And now after knight e4, once again, I'm going to show you the plan. c5, we need to defend the pawn, so maybe king f7. I will just demonstrate the idea. So c5, let's say, I don't know, just whatever. Actually, then the engine wants rook d8. But the combined idea of occupying the d file and the long diagonal is going to be absolutely decisive. Yeah, Nelson already jumped into e4 with the knight, and he's a happy camper now. Opponent plays rook d3. This just makes things worse, really, because now c5 is not challenged at all, and after bishop b2 we can start offering trades. The biggest problem in this position, by the way, which I didn't even realize because I was looking for checkmates on the diagonal, is that now every endgame scenario is completely winning for Nelson because he has the 3-on-2 on the queen side, and white's pawns are completely rigid. So if all pawns come, all rooks rather, come off, white is utterly, irreparably, hopelessly lost. Like this position, level material is -9. And the reason for that is because now I'm just coming in with absolute carnage city, and once the queens are traded, this bishop is the worst piece the planet has ever seen, and I'm going to take this pawn, and this is a queen. And this is black's strategy from here on out, and for most intents and purposes, white is utterly helpless against it. Yeah, c5 has been played and she's thinking. Back, rook d8, rook d1 played, and here I didn't see what Nelson played. It wasn't rook d3. Maybe he played king f7. Yeah, okay. So I suck at observing a chess game, but I'm very good at predicting it, right? And then she slid the queen into b5, which really is a neither here nor there type of move. We still want to take, we still want to trade, and we still want to penetrate. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Nelson is gonna take. In fact, I'm so sure that I'm going to put it on the board. Haha, gotcha. Gotcha, and she is going to take back with the lady. Okay, that was not the prediction of the day. Turns out she took back with the rook. Okay. So now rook d8 is a no-brainer, says me, who often gets surprised by how my no-brainers are actually not quite as simple as I would say. But yeah, rook d8 played. Good job. Good job. I mean, take is out of the question, so she needs to play some kind of a pass. The a5 pawn is immune because the d3 rook is hanging. Once takes happens, the queen defends the pawn, and even if it didn't, queen d2 check would mow down the board. Bishop c1 is a move, bishop a1 is a move, and some king move. Actually, the only king was king h2, otherwise the knight takes the pawn. So it's actually white is down to 3 moves, maybe 4, 5, that's it. Ah, she went back to c4. But probably she was coming to terms with the fact that her position was dead lost. Now Nelson is going to take, and then he's going to play queen to b7. Alternatively, scrap that, actually let me pause the video. No, Nelson is 125% going to play queen b7, styling a little bit on this lovely opponent of his, because after rook d8 we have got the super sexy discover check, picking off the queen on c4. Guaranteed that Nelson is playing queen b7 here. Guaranteed. I'm upset. Nelson, you have made me upset. Why didn't you go queen b7, bro? Oh, man. Ay. Now, of course, he's doing it, which is literally the same. It was merely styling. Like, the evaluation is the exact same. I'm just being a doofus. Getting upset. Yep, queen b7, excellent. And now the deadly threat on the diagonal. Well, we don't exactly have a deadly threat, maybe just knight d2 and then coming in with the queen, or knight g5 and then incoming queen. It would have been actually more dangerous with the queen coming here first, but it is still completely deadly. And she sidesteps the check. And now Nelson should really play here queen d5. I don't think he will. I have a feeling he's not going to play it. But this is an absolutely knockout punch move, because after take, the pawn mass is unstoppable. Right? It's as simple as that. Like, white comes closer, c4. If you don't take, I will play c3, bishop back, and then I will take this. And that's over, because then there are 2 pawns rolling in. And if they take, then it's again 2 pawns rolling in, and I can pick off a third one. If they don't take the queen on d5, then queen d2 wins the bishop. Or trades the queens, which again wins the house. So from a practical point of view, me as a coach, if I had a student who didn't play queen d5, I would be upset. Unless knight f2, queen f1, queen f3 brings mate in. But I don't see the mate here. It's very oppressive, it's very threatening, it's very intimidating. But I don't see the win yet here. Whereas queen d5 in every line is a game where you can switch your brain off, and it's only the hand that is gonna play the rest out. Right? And that's the type of win you always want to have available for you. By the way, there's a little tactic here that I think prevents Nelson from going for this, which is this, followed by this. But this is, again, complete hope chess, because this pawn is going to be caught by the king. Easy. Let me demonstrate. That's it. That pawn is not going anywhere. If you go back home first, I just shut you out. And again, I go here, I take, and the bishop is dead. And so, yeah, queen d5 should definitely be the move here to be played. If someone told me this is my position against Magnus Carlsen, and if I win, I get the glory of beating Magnus Carlsen. I was about to say I get $1 million, but like, who cares? Beating Carlsen is a lot better. I would play queen d5 here any day of the week. Because I know that I beat every move, whatever they can throw at me after that. Knight f2, queen f1, queen f3 looks super juicy. But I don't see a forced win here. Like, I just don't have it yet. Like, white is barely able to make a move. And is certainly losing. But I don't see a forced win here. Not the easy one that I saw in the other lines. Nelson is in a big, big dilemma. Queen d5 should be played, really. But I have a strong feeling it's going to be knight f2. Yeah, look, it's winning. I don't like it. I really do not like it. Because Queen d5 was a clean as a whistle win. Yeah, Queen f1. Her body language, by the way, indicates that she's not having the time of her life. Queen f3, yeah, played. So we knew all of this was coming. Now e3 is hanging, so likely bishop c1 is going to be played. Yeah, bishop c1 played. And I'm guessing that Nelson here is going to either pull the knight back, which is still a completely winning game, or first king up, and then pull back the knight. The idea being that once the king is here, and we go knight d4 and they take, we can penetrate here and win this pawn on top of everything else. Which is a very clean plan to win from this position. Very nice too. No, he went to e7, but that is just as good. Although I'm not quite sure where the king is going. I guess this is just a pass because you can't really you can't really go to d7 because we get checked. Oh, she played e4. Okay, that is complete desperation. I mean, fe is the most natural move and then the e-pawn rolls in. This looks like it has caught our good friend Nelson a bit off guard. Obviously, queen takes is not playable because the knight is hanging. Knight takes is totally playable because this endgame is just completely, totally killing. And really could be a choice. But Nelson would have traded queens earlier if that had been his intention. So I expect fe, which is totally fine. And then the pawn is rolling. He's going to take e4 with the pawn. Yep, he has done that. And I expect her to resign here, actually. Either that, or she's going to sack another pawn. That gets captured, push another pawn, e3, and then resign. Yep. I read the mental state of the chess player like a psychologist doctor. He's not even respecting the pawn, he played e3. Fair enough. e2 is a game-winning threat, so likely the bishop will have to be sacked, and then carnage ensues. I tell you why she did this though. I overlooked one idea. If I take this, she has a check. And we wouldn't want to allow this. So actually, good on Nelson for catching this. That's why he played e3 here. Yeah, that's very cool. That's very cool. And the same applies here, except not. Because now after e2 bishop check, I can take since there is no queen check here to follow up. Yeah, that's it. So Nelson is going to play e2. She's going to go check. And after king e6, handshake is going to happen. Yep, e2 played. By the way, a really charming motif here against queen c1, which introduces the check. If you don't want to bother with calculating your opponent's counterplay after knight d3, queen c4, if there are enough checks or not, you can simply just liquidate here by queen h1. And then after queen takes, knight takes, they can't take the knight because it's a queen. The bishop has to rush back home. And then knight f2, knight d3 will support the pawn promotion and ultimately victory. So she went bishop g5 check. And we have captured the pawn on e6. Yeah, queen c1 and queen h1 check. This is gonna be it. No, not even. Wait. Yeah, she gave up. She gave up. Ugh! Victory, baby. Victory. All right, excellent job. So 3 out of 5 we are. An outstanding victory, an exciting, strategic, more maneuvery type of chess game today behind the black pieces, but an awesome victory for our Nelson, who is once again on 3 out of 5, and I can't wait to bring the last 2 games of this tournament to you. So please, guys, stay tuned. Don't forget to sub, to like, to comment down below. Check out my channel where I also provide similar educational content. And without further ado, I will let you now go. I look forward to seeing you in the next round. Thanks for watching. Bye.
What's up, guys? I am super tired. 3 games is brutal in one day. I'm just not used to it. My brain is just done. But 86 accuracy in this game, like, I am super happy with that. I was never really in trouble. I felt like I played from start to finish like a good strategy. close up the position, trade off the bishops, use the knights. Like, yeah, really happy with how this turned out. I felt like Ellery played pretty well. Like, it was a tough game, but I think I made a lot of good decisions, and yeah, I can't complain about this one. So yeah, I mean, is there anything I need to say about this? Like, classic knights against bishop situation, and yeah, I felt pretty good about it. I mean, I don't really know. Oh, there was some crazy moment where I was thinking about sacking my queen for a rook. I don't even remember. Oh, it was okay. It was like something here. Yeah. It was like this, and then rook d6. I'm not even gonna lie. I was actually thinking about moving my queen here, and like thinking to myself, can I somehow like win with my pawns? I was thinking like if she takes, then maybe I can push. But even there, no. It's just crazy. I wasn't gonna do it. I'm just letting you guys know. Like, it did cross my mind for a brief moment, and then I think I was gonna play c3. Yeah, I was gonna play c3, and then I forget what I was gonna do. Something to defend against some of the threats here, but yeah, the c3 pawn. Anyway, I'm happy with the results. After the way the tournament started to be going into this next round with 3 out of 5, super happy. Yeah, I can't complain. So see you guys tomorrow for the final 2 rounds. I need to go rest up, recoup, get some energy, and yeah, we'll see what happens.